All right, so back with something close. There's still shadows everywhere from about three lights. Now, of course, all you need to do to create more lights in your scene, especially when you're using the same light, is to just duplicate. So I just do Control D, or select the light and um, drop down to this menu in our Edit um, top menu, and you can see duplicate. So you can duplicate your light multiple times to achieve the effect. So, all right, we have what we want basically, but we need to control how these lights are affecting other objects in our scene. And so we're going to talk about light linking. Now, basically, what that means is that in Maya, you can determine what lights affect what objects and remove any object that you don't want so that that same light will not cast a shadow or not light that object. So you find that option under our um, let's just again. Okay, there it is relationship editor. You can see we call light linking. Under light linking, you have two options called light centric linking or object centric. It means that you have to simply determine who controls what is not available anymore. So if it is the light and you say the light is the one, you're using the light to determine what object not to shine on. If you are saying object centric, you're using the object and saying this object, these are the lights that can affect you. So I'm just going to click any because they both do the same thing. All right. So you can see that on our right we have the light sources and on our left we have the objects in our scene. All right. So I'm just going to select this point light. You can see that when I select it, it shows all the things um, that it is connected to. Now you want to just check which is which because you cannot know what objects in your scene are being affected by this light with the names that you have. Because this is one reason why you should name your objects well. But I can come into something called the outliner where I can see all the objects in my scene and then I can place what object is where. Alright, so just before I come to the light linking again, you can tell that this is the A of my object, this is the I, and this is the T. So the other grouped items. Alright, so maybe what I want to do, because because of some of this stuff in this scene here, I want to try and just delete so I can delete a history, any stray nodes that there are. Alright, so these are the objects that make up the word Airtel. So I may just want to either combine them or group them, but I've done combine and you can see that this is our new object. I can double click on that name to give it a clearer name. Alright, this is our um, background, and then this is our blob. Let's call it blob now. Okay, so I've done that so that I can now better recognize what object is what. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my light linking tab. You can also minimize them and they're available. So here you can see the new names. Now the point lights are basically for this object. You don't want them affecting the background or letters. So I'll just click blob is this. This is one we want to keep. Everything else I just remove from our objects. All right. Um, so I do that. I select the second light too. I remove them. I do this. I delete them from the object. Um, Now I can try and take another render and we can see if that object is still working on our scene. You can see that now we don't have the effect of this point light affecting um, our blob any affecting the rest of our text, and we can see the initial background we created with um, our ambient light. Right, so um, there's still this shadow here, and I think we can transfer and fix that by telling our light not to cast any shadows, and that way you can walk past any of those issues that still crop up. Not that this is a product shot, so your aim is the beauty of the shot and not the realism of it. Because if you are trying to deal with the realism, then you would probably need to see the shadows of everything in your scene. Alright, so just selecting this. Alright, and click on shadow, and right now it is using a ray trace shadow. There are two kinds of shadows that you can use. They are just basically the models of shadow creation that Maya uses. So if I uncheck this, I say you should not use any shadows any longer. Alright. Um, do the same for this other ones. So I can see the effect of that light. There's a bit of too much highlighting in this corner from this light now. Let me just see if I can try and hide it behind that object so that highlighting that it is doing is reduced. Maybe I'll reduce the intensity to something like 0.35, and then we can try and rendering again. We still have a bit of that highlight there, but I think it's something that we can live with, and we get something slightly close to this initial test logo, or even better because of the way that we are using the light to achieve the effect that we are trying to create. I just wanted to see if I can still drop that and reduce the highlighting on the body of the logo. But there we are. So we have something that looks cool, and a white background is always looks better than a background than a black or black background. So I just recommend, all right, that as you work, um, think about the scene, think about what looks good, because that is what is the most important thing for your work. There's a reason why big companies like Apple usually do a lot of their product shots and product visualizations on a white background. It is just a lot better than black. I'm not saying there are no good uses of black, right? But you want to think a little bit more about what you're trying to do and what the colors that you use, how they either attract or detract from the message that you're trying to play. So there. Okay, so I just needed to finish this up so that we get an idea of how to use light in our scenes to create different effects. In this thing, we have used the ambient light to as a sort of background light for our scene. Um, and then we have used the point lights to create the highlights on our bling object. All right, so there's that. So to the thing I really wanted to talk about um, today, which is models and rigs. Um, models and rigs. So when you start talking about let me open this up in my okay, this is not the right class. Okay, this is where when um we start talking about animation, you begin to have to deal with mm, so like I was saying, when you want to talk about animation, you want to start dealing with um how to make objects move, all right, in your scene, how to make objects move. And when you start dealing with topics like that, then you have to first think uh, about what can you do to the object that makes it now have the capacity to move. All right. First of all, you want to create something that looks like it has life in it. So yeah, we humans are most likely going to create something that looks like a human. So that is their reference for living things. All right. But in the world of cartoons, you can go a bit further than that and extend that idea to do some other things like this cube man that is here that used on an earlier project for client, right? But just as an example here, so this is our model, and we can see that it has hands, it has feet, all right? And when I click on some of these controls here that are made up of knobs, curves, actually, you can see that we effect change on the um on this character. And how do you go about that? You have to rig. Rigging, in my own opinion, is a much more important step in the animation pipeline than the animation itself. If you get good animators, you will get good animation. But if you don't get a good rig, no matter how good the animator is, you will only always fall into some traps. All right. So that's why we're talking about it. And I'm just saying some of this as precursors to the next few topics that we're going to talk about, so that you can get a sense of what it takes. Now, this is our character. Let's take out all the knobs. This is a character without the knobs, without those controls, because they are called controls. And it's just a character. You can move it like this. Okay, we have already linked its movement to some other things. But you could move it the same way you would move an object like this, like a box. All right. So you could move it like this. All right. But how do you begin to make separate sections of it move independently in a keyable way? Keying is the um, method of creating instances of motion that you then piece together to create an animation. All right. So you have to begin to think about a rig, and a rig is a way of creating a skeletal structure or model to then attach to your character or object that you have created to give it the motions of that skeleton. So you have to create a skeleton or create a structure of bones, because humans move based on the bones in our body. We move around angles, around the elbow joint, because there is a socket at the elbow that rotates. All those things, you integrate the ideas into 3D, and you have to create a skeleton or a bone structure and then attach that bone structure to the character or to the object that are created, so that then the movement of the bones become the movement of the object. All right. So in this case, our skeleton then see if I can joint. This is our skeleton. All right, you can see that this is a system of joints and skeletons that create that object that you see. Without this system of joints or bones, you will not achieve um, an object that you can now control and move. Now, the controls are things that have visual cues to show us how to control the bones that we have created. You don't want to be touching the bones directly, but you want something that can help you control them. So by creating these controls and linking them to those bones, you can then rotate that control, and you can see that this is the joint that is actually being rotated. This is the socket, as it were, or joint on the bone that is being rotated. If I select some of my hand controls here, all right, and then move that, you can see that this whole bone structure moves with it, and this is how you create characters that you see in the movies. Of course, the controls on this are quite simple, but on more complex characters, you have more complex controls that deal with the face and points on the face, the hands, the foot, all those things, the chest. You have controls for every one of those things so that you can individually move those areas and then key the points or the controls that you have created to create an animation. So we're going to talk a lot more about this in coming topics, and just needed to give you a brief precursor to that topic when we start talking deeply about animation. Of course, not every object has to be rigged to be animated. The square that we have created can be animated by simply moving it, selecting it. So I set a key at the beginning by pressing S, and then I move it and press S again. Um, you can animate it. Okay, that isn't working right. Okay, I have a graph that is making my life difficult. Mm, Sorry, some of my settings can usually mess up with um, trying to do what I want to do. I'm just looking for my graph editors. Let me close a bit of all this one so I can focus on my graph editor. And my graph editor, I've set some steps that make the animation move in steps rather than linear. So now I can play it, and okay. So before you talk about animated characters, you can see that you can do the same thing to objects. Like, so you want to animate a phone, showing some details on the screen. All those things, they don't require rigging. They just require you to be able to animate the motion, the the rotation of the object, all right, or the scale of the object. So all those things, if I do them, you can see that all those things are affected at the same time. All right. So animation is not only limited to characters with bones and joints, but you can do stuff with. So you can do a logo intro for a company and still integrate the concepts of animation into them. So we're going to talk about how to do that, how to do it right. Um, the pitfalls and the things that people usually quickly step into. I'll have simple solutions, and as soon as you apply those solutions and start thinking in the right way about it, you always make something that is good, that is professional. Right? So that's going to be it for now. In our next class, we will start talking about the principles of animation and looking more in depth at characters and object animation. All right, so that'll be all. Thank you.